right, I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. This is the March 27th, 2013 meeting of the MARTA Oversight Committee, MARTOC. We have two items on today's agenda. A presentation by MARTA on its plans to comply with the 50-50 split when it becomes effective again on June 2nd, 2013, in the absence of any action by the General Assembly, if that is what ultimately is the case. And then a presentation by MARTA on its bonded debt burden. I requested that second part to be, in essence, the same presentation that was made previously, and if well, we do have one of our new members here, so we'll proceed with that then. If it was just folks who had heard the presentation again previously, I might have dispensed with it, but since we do have one of our new members here, we'll go ahead with it. All right, so if I can call Ms. Parker, let you direct who's going to present on these two items.
Actually, I can do it from here. Mr. Chairman, thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. We do have the two presentations. The first will start off with the briefing on the impact of the 50-50 not being lifted effective sometime this summer. And I have Davis Allen up to make that presentation. And the chairman and I are available to answer questions as well.
All right. Davis.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. As Mr. Parker stated, we are going to do both presentations.
Mr. Allen, if you can move the microphone to you.
Okay, great.
We are
about that.
Being broadcast live.
Okay.
Worldwide.
Great. Okay. We're going to make a presentation this afternoon on the 50-50 split impact. The current change to the 50-50 split ends June 30th of this year. The impact to MARTA it may or may not be approved in fiscal year 14, we're going to discuss now. Let me also state that the current MARTA Act currently requires that all sales tax collected be split between capital and operating based upon the 50-50 split. We had a relief in the last 3 years where that was lifted, but that goes back into effect July 1 of 2013, where 100% of the sales tax must be split between operating and capital at the 50-50 rate. Also, from our research, MARTA is the only transit in Georgia that this applies to, and we've also done some nationwide research, and no other transit in the country has this stipulation on them. So with that, we're going to move forward with the presentation. First, we're going to look at the impact of the 50-50 split between fiscal year 12 and fiscal year 16. Once we do that, we're going to look at what it does with us in the outer years, starting fiscal year 17 through 22. And we're going to show what we plan to do with this impact of not having the 50-50 split relief upon us in fiscal year 14. This first slide shows fiscal year 12 through 16. 14 is the fiscal year that we're concerned with right now. Looking at the current sales tax projections, that first column on your left, based upon that projections, our capital requirement for fiscal year 14 is $173.5 million. What that means is we have to pay our debt service out of that, plus a portion of that goes to support the capital program. Of that 350, 173.5 is dedicated toward the capital program and the debt service. That that fourth column to your right there where it says 50% sales tax, that's the 50% of that first column. The second column from your right is the amount of sales tax that we would have been able to flex to operate if the 50-50 relief had continued. So as you can see, for fiscal year 14, that amount is $1.683 million. And this is the same presentation we gave to you all last year on the 50-50 split. So the second year, fiscal year 15, that dollar amount based on the sales tax projection is $3.3 million, and for 16 is $4.5 million. So over the next 3 years, cumulative, we're looking at about $9.6 million if we had the flexibility of the 50/50 being released.
So, Mr. Allen, and the reason that the potential additional flex to operations is comparatively as a function of MARTA's total budget, small number. I mean, $1.6 million is not a small number by any stretch,
Right.
but as a function of MARTA's overall budget, relatively small, is because the at least a significant portion of the capital side is used for debt service anyway.
That's
correct? All right.
That's correct. Right now, in that fiscal year 14, we're looking at $147.5 million in debt service and $26 million to support the capital program. Okay, so that takes care of the first 3 years. Now, we're going to get into the impact of not getting that $1.683 million at a later slide. But I want to show you what the future holds with that sales tax. Fiscal year 17 through 22, we get into some pretty substantial numbers, you know, if we could get that 50/50 relief completed. Because
Well, I'm sorry, Mr. Allen, before you proceed, let me ask one other question. Why does the number because the second, going back one slide,
Yes, sir.
the second to last column, that's an annual number, right, for the
That's correct.
current fiscal year? Why does the number increase from year to year?
Because of your debt service and your capital program. Your debt service goes from 147.5 in fiscal year 14 to 162.6 in fiscal year 15. When we get into the debt service, you'll see those same numbers. We got a debt issuance in fiscal year 15.
Representative Riley.
Mr. Allen, you previously provided us with information that said for fiscal year 12, you used 42% of the total sales tax available
That's right.
for capital, and now you're talking about using almost the full, the full 50% in future projections.
We're doing that in fiscal year 14. We changed that scenario back when we did those projections back in 12. Starting fiscal year 14, we're allocating 50% of the sales tax to capital, not
Okay.
42%.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to clarify that in FY12, you only utilized 42% of the available amount of sales tax.
That's correct, because we had the 50/50 relief during that time.
Correct. And what is your FY13 contemplated to use from the total sales tax?
50%.
Well, in this existing year, you're not going to flex any to operating, the way the budget was prepared?
I need to go back and double check that. I think we are flexing some. on the
I
operation.
believe so also.
Okay. I can double check that and get back with you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, this next slide shows the future sales tax projection and the impact of the 50/50. As you can see, when you get into fiscal year 18, those numbers are pretty significant. We don't want to kill the 50/50, but we want to take it away so that we can have that flexibility to utilize it in the future. These are some significant numbers. As you can see, as we get out to 22, it accumulates to about $58 million. And if the sales tax grows at a greater rate than this current forecast shows, that number could be even greater in the outer years. Now,
But of course, right now, we're only, I mean, at the outside, the General Assembly is talking about 3 years.
right.
Well, that's the current version of Senate Bill 155.
Okay.
But, I believe I've had discussions with folks involved inside MARTA that could be up to 3 years.
Okay.
So we're not really looking at this long-term forecast right now.
Right.
All right.
Okay. When we stated that in 14 we're going to be impacted by $1.68 million, the way we're going to address that, it's going to be impact addressed through our staffing savings. We're going to do some reorganization at the top levels of MARTA, and what you're looking at there now, we're going to eliminate some AGM slots, some other support staff that are related to those AGM, and we're going to be doing some further reorganization to account for that $1.68 million. Also, if you'll note, we're not going to impact fares due to this, and we will not impact service. There will be no fare increase or no service adjustment due to not having this $1.6 million. Any other questions?
And Mr. Parker, you will confirm that?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, as a part of the overall review that I'm giving to the board, in a budget presentation later on, either this month or early next month, we will have a reorganization that provides substantial savings that will take away this $1.68 million without having impact on fares or services.
All right, so if no further lift of the 50-50 split is passed, we will see no increase in fares and no service cuts. Is that correct?
No, let me be very clear. We will it won't be impacted by this $1.68 million. Now, we have not finalized
it will be
the budget.
for some other reason.
It could be for some other reasons, but we have already identified enough within staff savings. By, for example, I've had a number of people resign or retire. We are not filling those positions and covering them through reorganization. And I've identified 3 of those positions, 3 vice president level positions to the board already. But that's just the beginning. We'll further refine those and make that presentation to the board later on, either this month, not this month, in April or early May.
All right, and after you've made that presentation to the board, I probably will include it as include it as an agenda item here as well.
Be glad to do that.
All right, thank you.
Okay, if there are no further questions on the 50-50, we can move to the debt service.
Any further questions for Mr. Allen? Seeing none, thank you for that. Now, we'll move to the debt service in just a second. I do want to say that I have handed, and this is the only discussion of the legislation that's pending in the General Assembly that we'll have, but I have handed to Mr. Parker and Mr. Daniels and other members of MARTA staff a potential amendment, although at this point amending the bill is completely out of the House's hands, to Senate Bill 155. This potential amendment does really 2 things. It includes an increase in the lift of the 50-50 split to 3 years from the current 1 year in Senate Bill 155 as it left the House. And it also includes there in Section 7, and let me actually just hand these down to members of the committee so they can see what I'm referring to. So we'll be reading off the same page, that's right. Old Testament. Here, I've got more. There's 2 more. It also includes in Section 7 a streamlining of the collective bargaining process. For what it's worth, this would mean that there are 4 key provisions if this amendment were to be adopted by the Senate and sent back over to the House. Now, frankly, I don't know how the Senate is going to get through 40 House bills and all the agrees and disagrees they have and the budget on day 40. So I'll leave that in their capable hands. But it certainly seems like a tall order. But if this amendment were adopted by the House and by the Senate and sent back over to the House, and I would state on the record that I would push to agree to it, it would mean that Senate Bill 155 with respect to MARTA, it also has some other provisions with regard to a higher education board, with respect to MARTA would have 4 key provisions. The governance provision that adjusts the appointment authority for members of the MARTA board, as well as, let's make it 5 key provisions. The governance provision, a staggering of the board terms, 3 years on the 50-50 split, the increase in the general manager's discretionary authority to enter into contracts at $200,000 from $100,000 to $200,000, and a streamlining of the collective bargaining process. Of those 5 provisions, 4 of those are direct requests from MARTA. The other, the governance provision, which I understand to be the sticking point at this point, is an interesting sticking point because there was a bill in the 2012 legislative session that had governance and a 3-year lift of the 50-50 split that MARTA affirmatively worked in favor of. Actually had engagement by MARTA's lobbying team to see that bill through to final passage. It didn't make the cut because of all the machinations that happened at about 11:55 on day 40. But MARTA was directly involved in favor of that particular legislation. I'll say it again, I don't understand for the life of me why with one provision that MARTA was engaged in favor of in 2012 and 4 others that MARTA directly asked for, why we can't get this legislation done. Hopefully we can. I will give the 01 and 02 version of this amendment to Senator Gooch, and he can do with it whatever he would like to do on day 40, keeping in mind all the other business that the Senate needs to tend to that day. But this is about where we are. I am pleased that MARTA has come in here and represented on the record that if there are any fare increases or service cuts, it will not be because the 50-50 split was not lifted this year, and I'm going to hold you to that. That is a representation that has been made here on the record in this committee today. So, you know, if the 50-50 lift doesn't pass this year, I suppose no harm, no foul. But by the same token, you know, all 5 of those provisions are provisions at some point MARTA was engaged in pushing at some point in time. And 4 of them are direct asks from MARTA this year. I would hope we can get it done. If we can't, so be it. Senator Miller.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes, sir.
If that's the case, if you're in favor of the 4 for this current year, and the governance piece doesn't bother you, maybe it does, but it did not bother you last year, excuse me, to my knowledge, based upon what the chairman just said. Is there a reason why you all couldn't contact Senator Gooch and tell him to get this thing done, to get you the flexibility? Or if there is, I just, if somebody's got an answer, I mean, before we go down this road, if that's the case, if somebody makes a phone call, last time I checked, he'd probably listen.
Mr.
Senator Miller.
That's okay.
Senator Miller.
I cheated. I didn't bring my name back.
Senator Miller, as was presented, I guess it was 2 weeks ago, a week ago, to the committee, MARTA's board took action, passing a resolution, and the resolution laid out a number of different things that we wanted to accomplish during this current session, and was silent on the issue of governance and the reason why.
No, that's fine.
Yes.
If that's the case, I guess what I would say to you, because I've heard this over the years on the 50-50, and a lot of us, we continue to keep it letting it go out for a few more years at a time. All I'm saying to you, if you're silent on that one provision and you're in favor of the other 4 points the chairman just brought up, I would think MARTA should call the chairman of the Senate Transportation, Senator Gooch, and let him know your position. We're silent on one, but we want the other stuff. Is that fair? Ask on our part?
I think and the chairman may want to comment on this as well, but the position we're in is that since we have people who appoint board members from DeKalb, from Fulton, and from the city,
right,
then we've seen that there is a lack of consensus.
No, I understand it.
On the governance.
But you have not taken a position on that, correct?
That's correct. But
since you have not taken a position, all I am saying, if that is the case, then someone could call the chairman of the Senate Transportation Committee and say, we have not taken a position on this particular provision, but we agree with the other ones. Has anybody done that at this point?
No, we've not done that, and the reason why we haven't up to this point is that we understand that that would be a collection of items that move forward. And if it were presented in such a way that MARTA said, if these other items were supported, then we would accept the other component. Then that's the thing we've been trying to avoid, because MARTA does not want to be in a position where it's looking as if
Perfectly
we are
understandable.
negotiating that.
Perfectly understandable. All I'm saying is, if you're in favor of the balance of those provisions, and I think the 50-50 has always been so important to MARTA. I mean, I've heard this for a long time, haven't we, Pat? Then all I'm saying is I think somebody should make that known. And
Well,
if you and that you don't have a position on the first thing. That's my only comment is I think that is a good thing if you do that. I'm not asking you to do something you don't believe in or don't want, and that's fine. But the stuff you like, if it's coming to the Senate could always take something out too, okay?
Yes, sir.
They're not saying that they're going to, but they could. So I think you need to go on record with the Senate and let them know your position.
And we actually have done that. We we presented to to the Senate folks our legislative package, if that's accurate. We presented to a number.
Did you present it to the chairman of the Senate Transportation Committee? I mean, I get, but the cab and Fulton stuff, we get stuff from Marty.
Yep. And the answer is yes.
No, that's not what I said. Two different words. She presented to the Fulton and DeKalb delegations. It has not been presented to the Senate Transportation Chair. Last time I checked, he lives in Dahlonega. That's my point.
Understood.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Riley.
Thank you. My remarks or question will be to Mr. Allen, but I thank you, Mr. Parker. Mr. Allen, you recall, and I know you, since you provided it, the financial plan that you prepared for FY13 that you presented to the board. I just wanted to clarify that this financial plan shows that you prepared your projections for FY14 through 16 without flexing any of the sales tax. It was prepared just showing 50% of the sales tax collections for the next 3 years.
That's right.
But I did want you to verify for me that for those 3 years you are still projecting an operating deficit of $24 million, $22 million, and $23 million, which will erode your remaining reserves down at the end of FY 2016 to less than $33 million.
No, ma'am. We're working on the budget right now, and we've updated the numbers, and the numbers look a lot better than that now.
How soon will we might have something that would corroborate that? Because what we're operating on is what the board approved a year ago and shows even without any flexibility, there is still going to be operating deficits that would occur for the next 3 years.
Yes, ma'am. As a part of the 5-year roadmap that we are implementing, we will balance the budget in around year 4.5 or so, and that's with current projections. And the budget that I'll be presenting to the chairman and to the board next month or sometime again in early May will actually update where we expect to be and begin to answer, I think, the questions you have, and we'll be able to show you those shortly thereafter.
Oh, that's very encouraging. I'm excited to see that, and that will remain consistent with the representations to Chairman Jacobs that there's no anticipated service cuts due to the 50-50 expiration of flex.
That's correct.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Mr. Allen, now on the debt service piece.
Okay, this next presentation is on modest debt service.
Trading up.
We did present this.
Sorry.
Oh. Do we still want to present it?
Go ahead, Mr. Allen.
Okay.
A little too heavy on the Manischewitz there. Go ahead, Mr. Allen.
Okay, on the debt service presentation, we're going to show you MARTA's current debt. In addition to that, we want to show you how the market feels about MARTA and its current debt. And we want to show you how MARTA compares to other transit agencies across the country with that debt service and their capital program. As you may recall, this is the slide that we presented the last time I was here. We got numbers across the top of the slide that shows the number one is the sales tax forecast, actual and forecast. Slide 2 shows the 50%, and slide 3 shows the budget. And the lower half, where the yellow print is, that is the forecast for the future, starting with fiscal year 13 and 14. those were the future forecasts. When we presented this to you all last, we had not gone into the fiscal 13 year. We were just getting into it. So this is the same presentation, the same table that we presented to you all. As you can see, the issue when we presented this last is in that first column, the yellow column showing the forecasted debt services. And I think a lot of the committee members felt that debt service was jumping too greatly from the end of fiscal year 12. We jumped from 124.9 million in column 5 to 146 forecast in 2013. And we explained the reason why. That first column you're looking at in the yellow is based upon an estimated revenue of around 6 to 7%, around 6%. And the column right next to it, we generated that column based upon the actual interest rate that we utilized on the last bond deal that we did in June of fiscal year 12. And that last bond deal rate was 3.83%. So to show the relationship between our forecast column at 6% and this 3.83, we reforecast all of the numbers to show the difference between the two columns. And the reason that the 146 jumped 16.9% over fiscal year 12 is because of the interest rate and also the bond deal that we implemented at the end of fiscal year 12, and that debt service didn't hit until fiscal year 13, which is a huge jump from 124 to 146. Any questions so far? Okay. As you can see, our debt service at the end of fiscal year 12 was $1.8 billion. Now, starting in fiscal year 13, we started to pay that down slightly. It dropped to 1.784, dropped to 1.730. Then in fiscal year 15, we're issuing a new debt. We're proposing to issue $250 million in debt in fiscal year 15, and you will see the debt service jump up again, both in my original forecast and the forecast using the 3.83% interest rate. So when you look at both columns, you can see why we got the increases there based upon the various interest rate and when we're planning to issue new debt. At the end of fiscal year 22, if we issue debt according to this schedule, our outstanding debt would be $2.33 billion at the end of fiscal year 22. Are there any questions on this page?
Yeah.
We want to show you how the market feels about MARTA. In the eyes of the market, they view MARTA as a strong credit, mainly because 85% of our outstanding debt is all fixed rate. We've got about $1.58 billion of it fixed rate. $297 million of that is variable rate debt. Now, one of the other features on that variable rate debt is that rate has been constantly around 1% or less. So it's a very favorable rate for us. One of the features that we do have on the fixed debt and the variable rate debt is that it is all callable. If we watch the market and see those variable rates starting to creep up on some of those bond issuance, we can do a refinancing and refinance those bonds with a fixed rate debt so that we don't have that volatility out there with the rate interest. Also, we have a strong sales tax coverage. What that means is that MARTA's debt, based upon the 45% policy that the board has set, that debt needs to be at least 2.2 times. The sales tax is 2.2 times the debt. Right now, the market, the credit industry only looks at us for about 2.0% time, 2.0 for the debt. But we're averaging 2.4 times the debt on our sales tax to debt service, which is a plus for MARTA.
Hold on one second, Mr. Allen. Representative Ryland.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A clarification, are you utilizing 100% of the sales tax collected to make this calculation?
No, this is debt service.
No, but you're saying debt service is 2.5 times sales tax collection?
That's right. You have to use 100% of your sales tax.
But isn't it true that you only have, according to the law, 50% allowed to be applied to capital?
That is correct. But when it comes to the bonding, all sales tax apply to the bond. 100% of our sales tax go toward the trustees to support the bonds.
So it would be possible that more than 50% could be consumed to debt service that would short the operational allocation.
No, we won't do that. That's why we're holding it to the 2.0. We are actually at 2.4. If you go below 2.0, then you are getting into more than 50% of the debt service.
Has that ever occurred to your
Never
knowledge?
happened. It
Okay.
never happened. In fact, when you look at, let me go back. When you look at this slide, page 7, if I were to go back and calculate what that ratio is for all of the previous issued debts, you would see that we are averaging about 2.5 or 2.6 ratio there. So we never go below that 2.0.
Terrific. Thank you.
Okay, also, as I stated, we got another strong covenant that's viewed in the marketplace as very positive. Our board policy has a limitation of that 45% of the total sales tax that debt service cannot exceed. So based upon the 45%, you have a 2.20 debt service coverage ratio. And like I stated, we never even come close. We try to keep it around 2.4. Okay. Now this next slide, page 9, the bond issuance that we did back in fiscal year 12, we wanted to show you some of the items that was used that we paid for with that bond issuance. This is a list of some of the major items that we covered during that process, and these are your big ticket items. I think the biggest item on here would be your train control system. That project is roughly $156.2 million. But these are all of the items that we use to the proceed from that last bond deal that we completed. As I stated, we also want to show you some of our peers and what their debt service and capital programs look like compared to MARTA. The last page of this report, page 10, we pulled some information, a lot of it from off the internet from these other transit, and we also spoke to some of the people there, but we got a lot more research to do to get some of our own questions answered. We're looking at other agencies where their debt service is far greater than ours, but the total outstanding debt is far greater, but the amount of their debt service is substantially less. What we are finding out that a lot of this debt service is funded from a lot of the municipality, and a lot of the cities and the state help to support these other transit with their capital program. So they don't fund a lot of this debt on their own.
Senator, hold on one second, Mr. Allen. Senator Miller.
Mr. Allen, I think it seems to me, just looking at this slide, that you all are doing an awful lot with a little.
Absolutely.
I guess that's the message here, and we maybe need to have the rest of the General Assembly look at this, because obviously you don't have the. I throw Washington; they don't count because they get so much federal money. They're not even in the game.
Mm-hmm.
The interesting number to me is that with their total debt outstanding, like in Dallas or certainly Chicago, and the debt service, dollar-wise, like Dallas is a pretty good example. Is that because they're getting all this capital from other sources and the debt service? I'm trying to figure out why the debt service, where we have they've got $1.6 billion of additional debt, but their debt service is about the same cost as ours.
That's right.
And I'm not smart enough to understand why that. I just wonder why that happens.
Yes, sir.
And maybe because they had somebody from Texas that came to Georgia's going to help us out. That's the only thing I can figure out.
Each one of these has their own story, and they are quite complex stories. But in Dallas's case, for example, even though they have a huge amount of debt outstanding, they're getting big chunks of that back from the federal government.
That's what I thought. Well, that's what was going to be my guess, is that Uncle Sam is taking care of a lot of this, so that's why their debt service is the way it is.
Right. One of the things MARTA has missed out on in comparison to all of these groups is
and that's my next question.
Yeah.
What are we going to do different? I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, one more. What are we going to do different to get more federal funds like the rest of the world?
Well, here's one of the big challenges. In order to get the federal funds, you have to spend a lot of money locally as well. That, for example, the latest big person at the table is Denver, where they've received, I believe the numbers are around $1.1 billion of new federal dollars or so, but they've contributed huge amounts of money to make that happen. Typically, the federal government is going to meet you somewhere between 40 and 50% of the way. So if we had big projects,
Matching
then the
projects.
chances
It-
for us to pick up on these types of opportunities come with it.
And in both the case of Denver and Dallas, we're talking about a significant amount of new start projects,
Exactly,
right?
exactly.
Okay.
Those are new start monies.
understand.
And one of the other things that Dallas has in its favor is their region. They have a significantly larger region than we do who pay into the transit system.
I see. Thank you.
And then the
very much.
last one I'll mention is just Chicago, and I believe, Davis, your folks confirmed that of this debt service that they have recently picked up, the state is picking up 1.5 billion of their over their next 5 years. The state's picking up their
Hope you take
capital
this
costs.
slide next time you go visit the second floor.
Will do.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, that completes my presentation.
Jim, pretty interesting.
Any further questions for Mr. Allen? Seeing none, thank you for
Thank
the
you.
presentation. At this time, there's nothing further to come before the committee. I'll certainly recognize any members who want to add anything before I adjourn the meeting. Well, you'd be the first one I would look to. So, so there being nothing further to come before the committee, this meeting's adjourned.